Alright, it's Movember, day 22. I'm going to do a quick download on recovery tools. I'm inspired to do this. I'm doing the MOvember as well, so finished work. I always finish work late. Went for a walk, and I was talking to a friend in recovery who's been in recovery about 15 years. I've been in recovery 30 years. So we're out, and we've got this habit at the moment that after a meeting that he goes to, and when I finish my work, we go for a walk and we talk, and we just share from the heart. And it just really hit me tonight that I don't know how people that are trying to get through mental illness, addiction issues, or physical illness that's based on developmental trauma can do it without a lot of support. Now I'm going to do a couple of things real quick, just to sort of bring up why do we need an elaborate structure. Patrick Carnes has got rule number 14 of Patrick Carnes' rules of getting well, and he was saying that if someone constantly relapses, there's three things that aren't happening. One is that there's secrets undisclosed. Two, there's an inadequate first step, so we haven't thoroughly looked at what we're powerless over and what we're unmanageable with. And the third thing is there's an inadequate recovery structure. So let's have a look what he means. Now if we look, the other day I did the recovery addiction cycle. So the addiction cycle, starting with there's core beliefs that we have about ourselves, where we dislike ourselves, the I am statements, not good enough, not lovable enough, not okay. And then we have impaired thinking, generally about ourselves, about those core beliefs that we have, that I'm not okay, or I'm not lovable, the world's unsafe. But then also this drives us towards our addictive cycles. So whatever addiction we've got going on, this cycle then depends on, firstly, fantasy. We drop into thinking about whatever it is that we do that medicates how we feel. That leads on to the rituals, so we get stuck into the rituals of what we do to get ready to go and do it. So we feel like a drink, we get in the car, we head to the pub, we feel like watching some pornography, we find some time and space, we get on the computer and we act out, etc., etc. Then eventually we will act out. From the acting out we will feel shame and remorse, and the further this cycle spirals into itself, the further and deeper that remorse goes. And then we can get lost here and go round and round and round. Now being mindful that every part of this is mood change. Every part of this activates the neuroscience of addiction. Right from the fantasy. That's why in rehabs they say don't neg rave, don't sort of glamorize or romanticize addiction, because if I'm sitting around the community table neg raving, then I'm already getting those adrenaline and cortisol and serotonin and dopamine racing. The further I go around here, the harder it is. And even the shame can be part of acting out. Now what happens from this, of course, life gets unmanageable. There's consequences. And these are the unmanageabilities of our life, and they start to mount up. Family, legal, health, etc. Now, what I'm just about to talk about is a recovery tool. So many people come into recovery and they think, look, if I just don't do that, surely that's enough. And I suppose why people suffer is they just try to not act out, and they don't get well. And in actual fact, they might go into another cycle. Now, the other cycle that can happen here is what they call, this is the acting out cycle. We can do a binge purge where we act in, and so we go into fantasies of over control. And this over control then goes on to rituals about that over control. So we go into list making and commitments, and we overcommit to things. And then we get down here and we sort of act in. We weigh, we measure, we go to all these meetings, do all this step work, do all this prayer work, and then eventually don't feel strong enough, good enough, or feel righteous and feel like we deserve, and eventually the pressure builds, the stress builds, and we act out again. So, recovery tools. If you're an addict of any description or have an untreated mental illness, then it's a full-time job. And so when we get into recovery, we've got to have any success, have an adequate structure in a daily plan. And first of all, it has to be daily. It's got to start with what we do on a daily basis. If you're using any drug, there's going to be evidence of that throughout your day. And so with recovery, there's got to be evidence of it without our day. Kahn says there's 3 things that are just essential. Exercise. Light exercise will do. Diet. Watching what we eat. And then rest. Adequate sleep. Now these are things that most addicts, and myself included, find really difficult to do. So they're the building blocks of any recovery. But in a daily plan, what we're trying to do is change, in a daily plan, the experience of our reality. Now if we keep our reality nice and simple, as Pia Melody does, then essentially what we're doing here with just exercise, diet and rest, we're giving our central nervous system and all the systems and structures in our body at least the optimum chance to function. This is really important if we experience complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because what happens then is that when we're activated, we go to those limbic behaviours. So we need to give ourselves at least a baseline ability to be the calmest and function to the best that we can, so when we're in one of those flashbacks that we can actually start to regulate our state. But essentially what we're after in a recovery program is to feed these sort of the different parts of our reality. Now behaviour, one of the things around behaviour is change is behavioural. You'll hear that, the colleague I'm working with at the moment running a men's sex addiction group, Adriana Villa, that's one of her bumper stickers. Change is behavioural, so we've got to change behaviour. There are 3 behaviours that change. But if we've got an addiction and we're going to join a 12-step fellowship, then the 12 steps are not just an idea, it's a daily plan. So we would need to include in those 12 steps meetings. Firstly, we have to attend. 90 and 90 is a suggestion. Changes the neuroscience in the brain, the repetition. But if you go into meetings, we need to join a group. Joining a group puts us into relationship with others, connecting with people, not just leaving when the serenity prayer is happening, because we want to stay for that second half of the meeting where they connect, they go for coffee, they have a meal. It's excruciating, but as Kahn says, we have to get over our reluctance to use those connections. The other thing is the phone. We need to get phone numbers. And phone numbers of people in recovery. There's a wonderful little thing going around Facebook at the moment where they're sending out men's line, domestic violence line, kids helpline, lifeline. Because I tell clients early on, until you get 12-step numbers, our society provides those numbers for our care. If you rang and said, I'm in early recovery from an addiction, I'm really struggling, I think I'm going to relapse, can I please talk to you? They're going to talk to you. So phone numbers are really important, and then ringing them when we feel good, not waiting till when we feel bad. Getting a sponsor. If you're going to work the 12 steps, get someone to coach you through them, teach you through their experience, strength and hope. Literature. We need to get the books and information, and these days you can get them all in MP3. You can get onto YouTube and get access to meetings from around the world. There's online meetings that you can get onto. I like to get on the, because I work late, I get on the 9 p.m. meetings of Narcotics Anonymous. So there's online meetings, and that meeting means you can hear people having their breakfast in Europe and just hearing people connect and share. I mentioned in a post the other day that the 12-step meetings, it seems like somehow we missed the boat, it's exclusive and it's a cult, or and it's not about the connection. Addiction recovery is all about connection. But I've been going to these places for 30 years and it's all about connection. It was the love and care of the people and the hope I heard in those rooms translated into action. People coming up to me and offering to help, offering me their number, getting me a coffee, picking me up and taking me home from meetings. And that prompted me to do the same. So this is a fellowship of men and women who the therapeutic alliance of one helping another's without parallel. So it's worth checking out. But if you don't do these things, nothing happens. The other thing is service. Getting in and keeping what we have by giving it back. I had the chance to listen to Airplane Bob share on tape at the Unity Day. He was a fellow that was there when I first got clean, and when he passed away through an airplane accident, it really devastated a lot of people who loved and cared for him. His service commitments, one jail meeting he went to for 14 years, and it was for young teenage offenders, and even there was a fellow sharing that used to go to meetings with Bob, and he said, "Oh look, Bob, they're not listening, man, they're not listening." And he said, "No, we're planting a seed." You know, it's so important that we carry that message even to people who at the time mightn't take it in, but they'll remember loving kindness. So these things on a daily basis translate, they start to help change the way we think. Because when we come into recovery, we've got a lot of old thinking. We assign meanings based on all of the beliefs we have up to that point, all of the history and all of the experience we've had. But all of this generally is about our using or our dysfunctional childhood. So essentially in recovery, what we're trying to do is create something new, this new thinking. So what makes that even harder is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I might do a little post on that. Post-acute withdrawal syndrome means for the first 0 to 6 weeks, neurochemically it's a roller coaster, and then from 6 weeks to about 18 months we can drop in the way that our chemicals react inside the body. So if you're in early recovery in that 18-month period, it sometimes feels like it gets worse before it gets better, and that's where the behavioural change is so important, because if you're in those rituals of recovery going no matter what, you're in good shape, because it will pass. So the thing that I would add to this is that in a daily plan that starts from the AM and goes to the PM, then we need to add things like a morning reading, something to start our head thinking in a new way. That we might do a morning journal, and we might do a morning prayer where we hand over our will and our life to whatever you believe, even if it's just connecting with the people in the group that you know believe in me. Just for today, I'll have faith in someone who in NA who believes in me. And so the idea then is just setting up our morning will, and in the PM finishing that way too, with a little bit of a reading, maybe a bit of a journal where you focus on step 10, clear your head so you can get to bed. Some people really need to listen to those MP3s at night because their own head and inner critic really beats them up. And then somewhere in the middle of the day, that's when we can have our meetings, that's when we have our outreach calls where we can talk to others, that's where we meet for coffee. And if it sounds like too much, if it sounds like this is ridiculous, then I'm going to ask you to be mindful of that cycle of addiction that I put up. Because we're not just trying to not use here. For most of us, we've come from developmental trauma that's affected us so badly that just being in our own skin, our own neurochemistry, our own implicit memory gets triggered throughout the day, and we can have emotional flashbacks that we don't even know why we're flashing back. Having to learn to affect regulate through techniques like yoga, mindfulness, all these things become that as we get these rituals of recovery happening, that we get to add to our life to increase our sense of well-being. But essentially too, it's grabbing and developing friendships in and out, hobbies, things that we now our dopamine and serotonin is not hijacked by the addiction. We can get to explore and like and actually develop a healthy lust towards good things. That our family and creating family and raising children, etc., takes on a new scope. So we start to build a life that has adventure and connection and direction. So if you're struggling out there and you're relapsing, check out those things. Is there secrets I'm not telling anyone? Am I really not looking at just how powerless I am and just how unmanageable I am, and I haven't created a recovery structure? Now this is a lot to do. But in early recovery, our life is on the line. We've got a psychiatric spiritual dilemma that if we don't treat it, it will treat us with jails, institutions and death. You know, I saw something the other day where it was an article saying that about the myth of the scare tactics of Bill Wilson and AA, and saying that our disease results in jails, institutions and death. The natural fact that so many people only die of alcohol per year. And you know what? That's not what he was talking about. What I think Bill was talking about is the adverse childhood experience study. It came along and it highlighted an important fact that people that have got adverse childhood experience, developmental immaturity, that go on to have any addiction, we die earlier than others because of the stress on our body and the punishment that we give it, especially if it's untreated. So they can argue the toss all they want about whether this leads to death, but the facts are that the stress is we die 10 to 15 years earlier than the cohorts on Earth that have a fairly functional, moderate life. So if you're out there and you're thinking, wow, this sounds like a tall order, then just think how much effort you've had to put into your addiction. I hope it's helpful. I'm a bloody ranter, I understand it. I believe in recovery, and I just sort of want people that are out there that are struggling to know if I just get the right prescription, just maybe I can make it. And the thing is, like tonight, I was saying to my friend when we were walking, all of this doesn't mean anything unless I'm sharing it with people. I was frightened when I first made my first phone calls, but now, tonight, I know, Mike's going to be online, we've got to get going, and I got the earphones in and off I go with my walking stick, and, because there's bloody spiders out there, and it's at night, and I know I'm going to connect. And once upon a time when I was afraid to tell someone how I really felt because I thought if they knew really who I was, they wouldn't love me, now I know, wow, if I just share my heart, what's happening for me right now, then someone else shares their heart with me, what's happening for them right now. I don't know anything better than that feeling. I used to try and find the high of that in drugs, but now it's an in the moment presence I feel that I get with my children and my wife, and I sort of hope, and I suppose I'll do these videos for MOvember, that if you can just push through and add these components and get that connection, then no man or woman or child or teenager needs to die again at their own hands. So take care.